Hello, in this video we are going to further explore the math class and the built-in functions, and to do that we're going to make a Pythagorean calculator. So it's going to be a program that takes in the two legs of a right-angled triangle and calculates the hypotenuse. Now, in order to do this we need to do some more advanced math. When I say advanced math, I mean mathematical operations that you can't use just keys from the keyboard to type in. You have to actually use what are called functions. Functions in a programming language are sometimes called methods or procedures. I'm going to refer to them as functions in this case. But for all intents and purposes, those words are interchangeable. So, essentially, Python comes with a whole collection of math functions that you can access to do some more complicated mathematical operations. And to find a list of those, you can just do a Google search for math, Python 2, and this is the link to the documentation for the math class in Python. So if we select it, it pops up. And within this page, we have all the different functions that can be called upon within the math class. And there's a whole bunch here. In fact, more than you're ever going to memorize, or a lot of them you won't understand what they do. But one of the key things about being a good programmer is understanding that you don't need to memorize everything, but you need to know how to go out and find what you need. So this idea of documentation and a listing of all the functions in a programming language is actually a really common one. So let's make sure we understand how this is going to work. And I have on the screen here two functions that we're going to use for the Pythagoras theorem. We have the square root function and we have the power function. So let's start with the square root function. The way this works is the name of the function is sqrt, and inside the brackets tells me what it has to take. So in other words, in order for this function to work, I have to give it one value, which is a number. So if I do math.sqrt9, that's going to return 3. So let's look at an example here. So remember, if you're going to, excuse me, if you're going to use the math class, the first thing you have to do is you have to import the math class, because it doesn't come along with every program. So if I go math.sqrt, and look at that, PyCharm's trying to help me. So you can find the listing of all the math functions here, and I put 9 in there. So if I say x equals math.sqrt, what this highlighted section is going to do is take the square root of 9 and then return that value, which is 3. So if I then say print x, and I run this, prints out 3. And I can put whatever I want here. I can put 900. So the bigger idea, this idea of a function, is a really important one in computer science. A function is a tool that you know what it does, but you don't know how it does it. But what I need to know in order to use it is I need to know the name of the function, and I need to know what it takes. So let's take a look at the other function, the pow function that we're going to use. The pow function is the power function. It's a function used to calculate powers, and the way it works is the name of it's pow, and it takes two parameters, an x and a y we can call them, and it calculates x to the power of y. Now there's a lot of documentation here which I'm not going to go through and read out to you, but it actually is really useful to read, and I do encourage you to do that. So if I come down here and let's make a variable y, and I go math.pow, if I do something like 3, 4, what this is going to calculate is 3 to the power of 4. And so if we print out y, we get 81. So let's put this into use, and let's make our Pythagorean calculator. So we're going to start with a print statement. This is a Pythagorean calculator. Print, the user will enter the two legs of the triangle and the program will output the hypotenuse. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take our inputs. So step 1, take inputs. So I'm going to say A is equal to input. Please input side 1. And again, I always like to put a colon in a space. It makes it look a little nicer. B is equal to input. Please input side 2. And now the second step I have to do is I have to do my calculations. So the hypotenuse, which we'll shorten to hype, well, what this is, we're going to do this in 2 steps. If I think about an actual Pythagorean calculation, it's going to be, we're going to take the 2 sides, we're going to square them and add them. So let's do that first. So I could write this as a times a plus b times b, but I can also use the math function here. I could say math.pow a comma 2, math.pow b comma 2. They mean the same things. So this first step here, I have step 1, square and add the 2 sides. The second step now is I'm going to have to take the square root of that. So this is a little bit of an interesting thing in programming that to get your head around initially. So what I've done is I've squared the 2 sides and I've stored the result in the hypotenuse variable. So what I need to do now is I need to take the square root of height. So if I say math.sqrt, height, this is what's called a self-referencing assignment statement. Step 2, take square root of result. Step 1. So, like I said a second ago, this is called, below line, is a self-referencing assignment statement. What that means is that it means that the variable that we're going to store the value in on the left is actually being used on the right. So what this does is it takes the value of height as it currently exists, which is a squared plus b squared, and then it takes a square root and then writes over that value with that new result. Now we can do a little print. So print a triangle with side 1 equal, or let's be specific, a right triangle with side 1 equals a and side 2 equals b. Print has a hypotenuse of height. So let's right click over here, let's give this a run, and again a nice Pythagorean triplet we can use to check is a 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to put in 3, 4, a right triangle with side 1 equals 3 and side 2 equals 4 has a hypotenuse of 5. And there's a Pythagorean calculator. Now of course you could modify this and take the hypotenuse on another side and find the third side, and that's a nice maybe next step challenge. I want to do one more thing before we continue. I want to show how we did this calculation in 2 lines, but you can actually do it in 1 line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a second variable called hype1. The reason I'm calling it something different is because I want to leave both lines up so you can see how the 2 lines are exactly the same as the 1 line below. So if I say math.square root, I can actually write inside the brackets. I can actually pass it math.pow a comma 2 plus math.pow b comma 2. So this 1 line here is the same as these 2 lines. And again, when we have these mathematical functions, it treats them just like any other math operator. So it's going to work out this value, and work out this value, and then it's going to add those 2 values together, and then it will take the square root of those values. So again, computer scientists like to kind of condense their lines often. But remember, it's figuring out that nice balance. If you're having trouble with this, it's always good to kind of break it up into a couple lines, because it will help you kind of see how the things are going. And as you become a more experienced programmer, you can then start to condense these into shorter statements. As always, please feel free to post or ask any questions, and have a wonderful day.